the cost of wind and solar does not end at wind and solar, right? You have to back up those energy sources with the other dispatchable resources that are listed in the above section of those LCOE estimates.
Can you not include, how can you do a levelized cost and not include a transmission line?
Because that would make wind and solar look bad, and that's not what they want.
Hi, I'm Amy Cooke.
And I'm Jake Fogleman.
We are your hosts for PowerGab. I got it right this time.
That's right, you nailed it.
You have no idea how many times it took me to say that last time. This is the second episode of PowerGab, our podcast here from Colorado, Colorado-based energy policy. A lot of great people talking about energy at the national level. We're the only ones doing it from a Colorado perspective. And we're going to try not to have it be all doom and gloom. We actually do want to provide solutions for you. Last time we kept saying, perhaps we should consider nuclear if we actually don't want the grid to collapse, if we want it to be reliable. So we're going to try and have some positive solutions out there, not just talk about all of the bad things. But one of the things we hear about a lot, Jake, is how cheap renewables are. Colorado's on the path to 100% wind, solar, and batteries. We have said that a fool's errand it will never happen unless the grid will collapse if it does. And so one of the things that we did at II, and actually you were the author of it, talk a little bit about your series, and then I want to introduce our guests today. We've got two special guests, but go ahead and real quickly highlight your series.
That's right. So you actually nailed it, that all you ever hear is a constant drumbeat of renewables have never been cheaper. This is actually the economical thing to do. We should close existing power plants and build wind and solar to replace them. But we, despite that mantra, we never actually heard any concrete cost estimates from anyone in the state. So
we asked too.
We did ask.
We asked a bunch of times.
Yeah. So we set about going to do a report series to put a number on that. And to do that, we hired a crack team of researchers that have been doing this for a lot longer than I have. And those are our first guests on the PowerGab podcast. So
and they are known as the energy bad boys. We have Mitch Rolling and Isaac Orr. You guys are in remote locations. Since you're bad boys, we're not going to divulge where your secret lair is. But hey, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to have you, or great to be here.
Hey, I want to read a real short clip to you guys before we get into the cost of renewables, because the question we asked, and we threw it out, we teased it in the last show. So how cheap are renewables? Because here's what Max Tyler, state representative from Colorado, what he said when he supported, it was HB 1001. So it was the single most important bill in the Colorado legislature, because it was the first bill out of the State House. And it was to increase the renewable mandate from 10% to 30%. And this is what he said. It's only going to be about $1 per month on a residential energy bill, and it will propel the development of renewable resources where the supply costs will never vary. Photons, wind, and rushing water are free. What more could we want? So if they're free and it was only going to cost $1 per month, why have we seen, what did you say, 70% on the last show? Why have electricity rates, why are our bills going up so much?
Whoever is promoting wind and solar always starts with something like that. When Germany decided they were going to go hardcore into wind and solar, they said this will cost the same as a scoop of ice cream. And now their economy is in tatters, right? So Germans pay among the highest electricity prices in the world. Only Denmark, who has also done the wind and solar folly have higher prices right now. Like they're paying through the nose through natural gas. Germany is deindustrializing. They used to be the pedestal. They used to be, oh, look at how great Germany is. Look how smart they are, and look how stupid America is. And boy, how the turntables have turned. And it's happening that way in Colorado too, right? So these programs are always sold as a cost-effective, free way to insulate yourself from the volatility of global commodities. But hey, guess what? Wind turbines are made out of copper, and copper is a global commodity. So you're actually not divorcing yourself from the commodity markets. And this idea that photons are free and the breeze is free. Well, they don't always show up all the time. So like you still kind of need the natural gas anyway. So it's just very simplistic thinking that gets us. It's like a second grade understanding of energy that gets us into this position.
One of the things when you guys did the modeling on this, wind and solar, oh, it's free, photons are free, it's all rushing water, it's all free. Converting it to actually usable power is super expensive. And the problem is they're intermittent, to your point, to Jake's point. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So you guys found we have to, if peak demand is about 18,000 megawatts in Colorado. And I think when you guys did the modeling, you found we needed to overbuild. And I don't know if you remember the number or if you...
It was like 9x overbuild.
Yeah. It's like 169,000 megawatts. And that's the problem with wind. Go ahead.
Sorry,
yeah,
put it another way. The mantra is always, wind and solar are getting cheaper. And when I look at things like levelized cost of energy data, it does look like wind is pretty cheap. Can you explain why that maybe is misleading and why your modeling chooses to go another route when you describe how much these resources actually cost in aggregate?
Yeah, 100%. Mitch, you want to tackle this one, or do you want me to?
Well, I can just say, yeah, I can say that the basis behind our model was a lot of what you just said, that people were kind of just suggesting that this would lower costs, be free energy. And then we were noticing prices, bills all going up. And so we looked into these models and we found out that they weren't modeling the system as it is. They were modeling the system as it had to be to get these renewables on the market. So some models we were looking at, they were doing like 25% of peak demand would be met with energy efficiency and demand response. Now that's just not reality, right? That's outside the limits of reality.
Let's take a step back first and talk about the levelized cost of energy, right? What is it? So ultimately, what it is basically people try to figure out the cost of electricity of a power plant per megawatt hour of electricity generated. So think of it as the cost of driving your car on a per mile basis, right? You have your upfront cost. You might have a car loan. You've got your maintenance. You've got fuel. If you have a car or a coal plant, right? You don't have a fuel cost if it's solar or wind. And then you divide that by how much useful work you get out of that machine over the course of its lifetime, right? So for a coal plant, that could be 50 years. For a wind turbine, that might only be 10, right? So when we're looking at the levelized cost of energy, Lazard is a big name that gets thrown around. Energy Information Administration is also thrown around a lot. Those two entities say do not compare the cost of a dispatchable generator to a non-dispatchable generator because those two types of power generators provide vastly different value to the grid, right? But that is the first thing that renewable promoters throw in the trash is that disclaimer, right? So they say, oh no, well, wind is as cheap or cheaper than a coal plant, and a solar facility is cheaper than a peaking natural gas plant. How about that? How do you like that? And it's just, okay, well, the peaking plant can be used at night. And if you have a system like North Carolina where they have a lot of electric heat, then you actually have a peaking winter demand at night. So your solar panel is worthless when your peaker plant is incredibly valuable, right? So the levelized cost of energy does not measure the value that a power plant gives to your system in terms of reliability, which is why we have our all-in cost that kind of like incorporates that. We can talk about that later. But yeah, ultimately, it doesn't work if you're comparing things that are reliable and things that are unreliable. Did I miss anything, Mitch?
Yeah, and I would just clarify that, you can't do that because the cost of wind and solar does not end at wind and solar, right? You have to back up those energy sources with the other dispatchable resources that are listed in the above section of those LCOE estimates. So, yeah, the cost does not end at the LCOE with wind and solar.
Yeah, there's a whole host of things that levelized cost of energy estimates from Lazard don't take into account. They don't look at the extra transmission lines that you need to build because wind and solar are built far away from where people live. So you have to build these transmission lines to nowhere.
Can you not include, how can you do a levelized cost and not include a transmission line?
Because that would make wind and solar look bad, and that's not what they want.
Oh, okay, okay. Got it, got it.
So essentially what Mitch and I have found is like wind and solar advocates have majored in creative accounting, right? Like they have figured out, all right, well, we can leave that cost off. And the utilities do this too, right? So we have Xcel Energy in Minnesota, and one of the things they do is there'll be a new transmission line, but they'll actually allocate that cost to the existing generators because they produce more electricity than the intermittent ones. So they don't attribute the cost to the intermittent source that necessitates the transmission build out in the first place. They'll say, "Oh, all the other generators are actually utilizing the line more, so let's allocate the cost to them." So it's all like fuzzy math here when it comes to these levelized cost of energy estimates. But and the other thing they don't take into account, Jake mentioned this earlier, is the overbuild and the curtailment, right? So you need to have a 9x overbuild in order to meet your peak demand or consistently meet your hourly demand with an unreliable system. And you need to attribute that cost to wind and solar, and they never want to.
Right. And why that's important is because when it comes to the LCOE, is because the LCOEs are calculated using a lifetime capacity factor of 40, whatever percent they want to use. And when you're curtailing, that effective capacity factor drops in some cases when you're talking high penetration levels of wind and solar to 10%. And that dramatically increases the levelized cost of energy per megawatt hour.
So when you guys, all of these factors come into play, and so when I'm going to pick on him again, Steve Fenberg, who's president of the Senate, said, what was it, January of 2023. Wasn't that when the task force was?
That's right.
So he goes onto Twitter and said, and I'm paraphrasing, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but he was saying, I don't understand. Prices were supposed to go down. Why are prices going up? We're going to find out. We're going to have a commission. And, we're sitting there throwing the BS flag. You were told repeatedly that the cost was going to go up, but they listened to photons, wind, and rushing water are free. So it's all free. And prices, Jake was saying, I think he said on the last show, have gone up. Rates have gone up 70% since 2004. And if you start to add in all the tariffs and everything else and all the fees and all of that, it's even more than that. Yeah. I think actually I looked at a bill from 2008 maybe, or actually I'll go back. Utility rates in Colorado in 2000 were 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, and I'm going to use a phrase, my all-in kilowatt, per cost per kilowatt hour, and that means all the fees, all the tariffs, everything they have is now closer to 16 cents a kilowatt hour. Now I get it. One is the rate, one is the all-in cost, but the point being, riders, fees, tariffs, all this stuff it was supposed to all be free. It's not free. It's not free. Wind and solar might be a free source. Generating electricity from it is not free. And in fact, it is really, really expensive.
Well, and as Isaac and Mitch's modeling shows, we ain't seen nothing yet, because we're only at about 37% penetration of renewables on Colorado's grid, and current state policy is 100% by 2040.
So wait, you said we're at 37%. Is that where we're at 37%? Remember, it was only going to cost $1 a month.
Right.
Max Tyler said it would be $1 a month. He wrote it in the Denver Post. I want him back here.
Yeah.
I want to ask what happened. It was $1 a month.
Well, and $1 a month looks like chump change compared to the modeling that these guys did for us. The total costs that they found for 100% renewables, meaning wind, solar, batteries only, nothing else, retired all the natural gas, all the coal, was a little, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it was north of $300 billion with the B. And you guys covered some of those cost drivers, right? The overbuilding and curtailment, but an under-discussed portion of that, actually I think the biggest portion of that in your modeling found was utility profits. If you guys want to dive into why that is. Why do renewables cost so much, and why do they end up enriching utilities?
Yeah, absolutely. You should have Mr. Dollar a Month on the podcast. I think that would be fun. You should invite him. This is an open invitation, sir. You ought to come on the PowerGab podcast.
Yeah, Max Tyler, you are welcome to come on and see if this is your $1 a month, your $1 a month on residential energy bills, if that's the case. But let's get to profiteering. Profiteering off of free resources.
Yeah. So we call this green plating the grid, right? So essentially, nobody really understands the way that monopoly utilities make money, because it's the opposite of every other business basically in the country, right? So a normal business, if you spend your money wisely and you have like an asset, let's say you have a factory and you buy a machine that makes widgets. As you pay that machine off, then your profits go up over time because you don't have loans to pay or to repay on that machine, right? Total opposite for the monopoly utilities. They have the exclusive right to sell electricity in their service territory. And as a result, they are required to provide that service to everyone, right? So that's kind of the trade-off that monopolies made. And the price of electricity is set by the Public Utilities Commission, because honestly, if a company is given an exclusive right, a monopoly in a certain area, it would be unfair to let them charge whatever they wanted for the electricity that they sell. So it's the price of electricity is governed by a formula. It's called the cost of service formula, and it sounds complicated, but it's actually really simple. It says the utility can charge enough electricity or charge enough for its electricity to cover the cost of providing service to everybody, plus a 10% profit whenever they build something new, and that expense is approved by the Public Utilities Commission. So that can be a new wind turbine, a new solar panel, even new corporate offices. So there's also another part of that formula, and this is the depreciation formula. So essentially so a utility makes money whenever they build something new, right? So that gives them a pretty powerful incentive to build new stuff. But they also make less money every year that new thing is in operation, right? So it's like you pay down your house, and eventually every year the utility makes less and less money. At the end of 30 years, they're not making any money on an asset. So let's say Comanche 1 or Comanche 2, Xcel's paid that asset off, so they want to shut it down as soon as possible because their company isn't making a profit, even though that is the lowest cost source of power for the residents. So Xcel is making bank off of building all of this wind, solar, and natural gas, because every time they build something, they get to charge an extra 10% so long as the Public Utilities Commission signs off on it. And that includes the transmission lines that they're building.
And also with wind and solar, there's a capital investment subsidy, and then there's a production tax credit. It's like a big grift. So they make money that way too.
Well, a lot of those subsidies are actually passed through to ratepayers. So when Excel, at least in Minnesota, I think it probably depends on your state, but I would imagine it's probably the same in Colorado, right? So Excel will file something called an integrated resource plan, and it says, okay, well, we want to shut down Comanche 3 20 years before the end of its useful life, and we want to replace it with a bunch of stuff that doesn't work very well. The commission has to have a very serious conversation about how like they are contemplating cost and reliability, and then they'll say yes. But one of the reasons that Excel will pretend that this makes any sense at all is because of the tax credits, right? So they'll say, oh, well, this actually saves money if we repower this wind turbine that's only been in operation for 10 years and it's supposed to last for 20. So like the essentially what the federal tax credits do is it gives the utilities the ability to cook the books and make stupid stuff look smarter on paper.
Okay. So our rates are, let me put it this way, our utility bills go up with free resources, and we subsidize them through our tax dollars, and it goes into utility profits because they get to build things.
Yep. I mean, your rates would be even higher without the production tax credit and the investment tax credit. So,
okay. So let's, if we didn't have the production tax credit, is there even a wind and solar lobby?
There'd definitely be less of one. I think that Mitch and I have been kicking around this idea that red state legislatures should tax wind and solar the value of the tax credit in order to level the playing field, in order to make sure that, reliable resources aren't being forced out of the market. We haven't got any takers on that. You think Colorado will jump on that proposal?
We should do a severance tax on wind and solar.
I'm sure the legislature will be right on that.
A severance, well, I think Wyoming does this. I thought they did a severance tax on wind. I thought there was something there, but I think we should do a severance tax on our wind and solar. That would be hilarious. Watch the Sierra clubs, watch their head explode. It'd be fun just to do.
Well, you should put it on the ballot out there, and you should say all the money will go to schools.
Right.
Yeah, that's the evergreen reason.
We're going to save kids by leveling the playing field on energy. So, okay, so you guys have modeled for us now twice. And you did it originally in 2019, did it again for this series. The series, I real quickly want to touch on the series that Independence Institute published, and Jake authored it. You first looked at 100% just renewable. Then you layered on, this is the amazing thing, and this is the complication of all of this. Talk about how, besides the fact of 100% renewable, which would be hard to do anyway, you start layering on things like the electrification of heating, home heating, and total electrification of, through EV mandates. That's why it's in a series of 3. Jake, do you want to explain that a little bit more, or we can let these guys talk about modeling? Up to you.
Sure, I'll just briefly touch on it and let them dive into what they did, because they did great work on this stuff. But like you said, there's already this one enormous undertaking going on where we're just going to close all of this existing paid-off infrastructure in less than 2 decades and then replace it with 9x the amount to just meet current demand. But as you pointed out, there's also a concerted effort to replace the fuel that you use for heating your home, for instance. And in Colorado, that's a big deal because over 2/3 of households use natural gas to stay warm in the winter.
Me.
And then, like you said, the entire light-duty vehicle market in the entire state is going to be electric too, and rely on a grid that's simultaneously becoming more intermittent, less dependable, while also increasing the demand on the grid. So that astronomically increased the cost that these folks found. If you guys just want to dive in a little bit into why that is.
And talk about, and also when you do that, what does this do to the grid? We're increasing demand, and at the same time, we're increasing intermittency of our resources.
Oh, you're going to crash it. Like, it's going to be fun to watch.
Is that it? So, thanks. Done.
After your primer about we're gonna offer you hope, and that's how we end it.
Here's our solution: get your generators now.
Head to the hills
while they're cheaper.
Head for the hills.
Yeah.
The thing about electricity is the supply has to be perfectly matched at every nanosecond, right? So if you are going to implement incredibly bad policies, which Colorado seems enamored with right now, and you're going to force the electrification of home heating, that is a massive quantity of energy that they're going to have to replace, even if you are using a heat pump, right? So I think in Minnesota, and it's probably similar in Colorado, like our energy demand spikes in the winter because space heating is energy intensive. So I think we use something like 4 or 5 times more energy in the winter than we do in the summer for air conditioning, right? And that happens in cold climates. So what we did was we looked at, okay, well, what if you used your magic heat pump and you said, okay, well, we're going to have these efficient heaters. Well, at -14, the heat pump shuts down to stop itself from breaking. And then you'd have to switch over to electric resistance heat. And all of a sudden, you are spiking your electricity demand even more than previously. And like the infrastructure isn't there for this. The distribution system isn't ready. The transmission system isn't ready. And it's going to be hugely expensive. Jake, you should have this number right off the top of your head. How much did it cost to decarbonize home heating?
I believe the entire decarbonization of home heating plus 100% renewables was just north of $600 billion with a B dollars. For many of the same reasons as in the first paper, right? You know, all the overbuilding to try to support that massive electricity demand, the utility profits that naturally flow as a result. So just an insane sum of money just for residential home heating alone it's pretty nuts.
It's insane. It's insane. And I don't know if you guys remember in 2019 when we did the paper, it was called The Radical Reorganization of the Grid, the cost of keeping the lights on. I wouldn't even say the number out loud. I was embarrassed by it. I thought it was wrong. I was like, there's no way. It was at that point, and we also included, we did a lot of stuff with land and battery prices too that have come down, but they're still not. But it was almost $900 billion. And I couldn't say it. Like I would say, I don't know. I think it's really expensive. So now we've come back again and done it again. And when all of that is, go ahead.
So to be fair, I will give our PUC some credit. You know, I'm not often one to do that. They actually, in Xcel's latest integrated resource plan, I think because they got their green eye shades out and saw just how much the costs were adding up, they actually slashed how much Xcel is allowed to own of what they're going to be building in this next period of building. So they're only going to be able to own 50%. So 50% of the several hundred billion that they're going to stand to make.
One more, because we've been doing the cost on this. We did it in 2019, did it again, and we layered on that series of 3. You guys modeled, and Jake wrote. The state came back with its cost. Go ahead. Do you want to?
I don't even think they published a top line figure for the cost. Well, first of all, this report hasn't even been published.
We haven't seen it yet.
They leaked a preliminary draft, and we obtained some copies that were published by a news outlet or whatever.
Yeah.
But basically, without the wording was we can get to 99.3% renewables by 2040 without marginally increasing electric rates.
Yeah.
It was some mealy-mouthed term to basically say it's not really going to cost anything else.
It's back to it'll only cost you $1 per month.
Essentially, that's right.
Even though we're all looking at our bills going.
We should do another podcast in the future where we've all read this study and we talk about how bad it is and like question, because they spent a pretty penny on it, right? Didn't you guys figure out how much?
I believe it was $150,000. I believe that was the total.
I could produce a whole bunch of crap for 150 grand if it's going to be that easy.
Well, and the pernicious thing is the study that's not even fully public yet is informing decisions at the Colorado legislature. When I testified on the nuclear bill, it was brought up, but we don't need nuclear. The state has already produced a study that says we're not gonna add that much cost if we just keep going the way we're going.
So and that's the problem. But okay, so one of the things we are going to try, and like we said, there is a way, if Colorado is really serious about zero carbon emissions, and we talk about this in the paper, and Mitch and Isaac, you guys did the modeling on this. Colorado could achieve, certainly lower emissions. I think you guys call it the low carbon scenario in the paper. By using nuclear, and it actually would save ratepayers. It's not, let's put it this way. This quote transition, which I call a forced march, or I've heard forced transition or whatever. Anyway, this transition is expensive regardless, but we can do it for a whole lot less if we use nuclear.
And it's practical. We've already seen cases where it's done with nuclear. We haven't had one case in the world where they've managed to transition the grid to 100% or even a large majority of their energy share to wind and solar. France has done it with nuclear. Like they showed the path forward. So it's actually practical, this one, and it's less expensive.
But it's Colorado, so practicality isn't generally entering into it. Do you have any? I was going to give these guys a chance to, promote the bad boys, or if there's anything else you want to ask, or if you guys want to, if there's anything else you want to comment on, we can give you guys the last word. But that should include a promotion for the Energy Bad Boys.
Yeah, we're on Substack at Energy Bad Boys. And also we work at Center of the American Experiment. We're a Minnesota-based think tank. And we've got all of our reports that we've done for other states. We've done modeling in, I think it's 11 states now. And we've also done EPA, or looked at the cost of reliability impacts of EPA regs in MISO and Southwest Power Pool. So MISO is Mid-Continent Independent Systems Operator. It's the grid to the east of y'all. And I guess you guys are joining Southwest Power Pool at some point, probably, right? So
thanks for the tease for our next show, which is to RTO or not to RTO.
Man, this wasn't even planned.
Yeah.
We're just good like that. That's what we have. Meredith Angwin coming on the next show to talk about the fact that Colorado is headed into a regional transmission organization by 2030. Good idea or not? So we'll ask that. You guys, what's your Twitter profile? You're at the fracking guy. Mitch, or are you?
I think I'm just Mitch Rolling.
Yeah, there you go. Mitch Rolling. Center of the American Experiment, the Energy Bad Boys. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate it. All right, coming up on our, like I said, on our next show for next week, the question, RTO or not? Looks like we're headed there, but is it a good idea?
I'm excited for it. I hope all the listeners are too.
Yeah, Meredith Angwin, author of Shorting the Grid, will be on with us. And if you like this, you like the content, please share it with a friend. Let them know. You'll be able to find us on all the usual streaming services. If you've got a question, you have a comment, you want to say something about, get something to Mitch and Isaac, or you've got a show topic for us, feel free to email us at info@PowerGab.org. Thanks for tuning in.